Hi, and welcome to the On the Hill podcast with me, your host, Katherine Getty. Each Thursday, I'll peel back the curtain of what happens in Washington, from breaking down current events without the bias, to interviews with fellow political nerds, and even, and maybe most importantly, ways for you to get involved with our U.S. government. Hello, and welcome to the first episode of the On the Hill podcast. I am so thrilled that you're here, that you're joining me for this adventure. This is going to be a podcast that breaks down what's happening on Capitol Hill. But before I get into that, I want to share a little bit about me, if this is the first time we're getting to meet. My name is Katherine Getty, and I fell in love with politics somewhere along watching Jed Bartlett become president on West Wing, listening to NPR on the radio on my way to elementary school, and soaking in Schoolhouse Rock videos like it was going out of style. Needless to say, I am a child of the 90s and a political nerd. I've lived in DC for now over 10 years, which is hard to believe, and I've held a variety of jobs around the political sphere. From lobbying to fundraising and a little in between, I've seen the good, the bad, and like most Americans, the ugly, but I still believe in our government, and I believe in engaging in it. And before you roll your eyes or turn off this episode, please don't do that. That'll mess with my analytics. I kid. I get it. DC and politics in general gets a pretty bad rap, but for good reason. There's name calling, sometimes gridlock, lack of results. We're only in January. It can really cause us to question the structure, the people involved. But this podcast is going to be a collection of sharing more about what's happening in DC without the bias. It's going to give you ways to get involved, from registering to vote to how do you call your representative, and interviews with friends, colleagues who can help peel back the curtain. Because I believe very strongly that if you understand something and you understand the context and the history, it can bring the temperature down, or at least that's going to be my hope. So join me along on this podcast, the On the Hill podcast. Thanks for joining this very first episode. We'll be back every Thursday. If you want to follow us on Instagram, the handle for the podcast is On the Hill DC Podcast. If you want to learn a little bit more about me, my handle is at Katherine Getty on Instagram. And as always, tune in next week for another episode of the On the Hill podcast.